How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be brewing a Kolsch style ale. A Kolsch is technically not a Kolsch unless it's brewed in Cologne, Germany, just like champagne is not technically champagne unless it's from France. So this is a Kolsch style ale. Basically the same concept. Trying to stay as true to that style as I can today. A Kolsch is pretty simple beer as far as the actual brewing goes. It's more of a complicated fermentation, which I'll get into later. As far as the beer goes itself, it's simply Pilsner malt and a little bit of malt complexity with maybe some Vienna malt and Munich malt. So normally I would show you the mash. Normally I would go through that procedure, but I kind of forgot to do that because last night I decided to do an overnight mash. So basically, here are my grains, kind of already done. Already been mashed. As you can see, I use the brew in the bag style for pretty much every beer I've done. I love it. It's easy. It's cheap. You don't have to worry about extra equipment, and cleanup's a lot easier. And I can still make great beer. And actually, I can still regulate the quality of that beer just as well as an all-grain brewer. Well, as a traditional all-grain brewer. This is still technically all-grain brewing. Anyway, the recipe that I used is pretty simple. I'll actually over here. If you can read my writing, good luck with that. Basically, decided that we're going to use 8 pounds Pilsner malt and 3/4 pounds of Vienna malt. Really simple. We're shooting for an original gravity of 1053. So basically, it's going to be a little stronger alcohol than your typical Kolsch, but given the lower brew house efficiency with brewing a bag, it's probably going to come out to around 5%. Estimated 5.9, but I don't really expect that to happen. My estimated pre-boil gravity is going to be 143. Anyway, those are the fermentables, just the 8 pounds Pilsner, 3/4 pounds of Vienna. We're going to use an ounce of hallertau at 90 minutes and an ounce of Saaz at 5 minutes, so that will be for aroma. And we're using yeast 2575 Kolsch 2 yeast. So last night I mashed this. Basically, I doughed in at 149 degrees. Actually turned out to be 147 since some of my math was off, but should be fine. And kind of played around with this experimental concept of doing an overnight mash instead of a 60 or 90 minute mash. So this is something I read about on Brewlosophy, which, if you haven't heard about it, it's a fantastic website that does basically chemistry experiments with beer and certain variables like, does it really matter if I have an overnight mash versus a 90-minute mash, and what's the perceived difference in the final product, where if that's the only variable between two batches of beer in a blind taste test, how does that perform? So anyway, basically people couldn't tell the difference, but the actual statistics of the beer, the numbers, the beer finished drier. It finished at it was actually a lager, it was like a Pilsner or something. It finished at 1.008 specific gravity versus 1.10 for 1.010 for the regular 60-minute mash. Anyway, brewlosophy.com, BRU-losophy. Highly recommend checking it out. It's really great as far as a resource for homebrewers. And it kind of goes to show that you don't really need to be extremely careful in some aspects of brewing. Some things you do, like sanitation, but other things like that, kettle trub, other stuff like that, you don't really need to be super picky about it. Your beer's not going to be ruined, is basically what they're trying to put across. Anyway, I'm heating up the wort now, so I ended up with about 6 gallons of wort. I'm going to boil this for at least 90 minutes because I really want to end up with about 4.5 in the kettle. So I have 4 in my fermenter, and basically then I'm going to ferment it for 1 week at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we're going to transfer that from the first fermenter to a secondary fermenter, which is only 3 gallons. We're going to lager that for about a month, and at that point I'll be able to bottle. So I'm shooting for a final volume of about 3 gallons to bottle, and I'm just going to kind of keep chipping away at that. So we're starting off with 6 here in the kettle, and that'll boil down. Anyway, I have a pre-boil gravity reading. Should be coming up pretty soon. It's in the freezer cooling down right now, and I'm excited to start this brew day. So let's get to it. Alright, so our sample for our pre-boil gravity reading has cooled down nicely. It's about 80 degrees right now, and it is reading 1.038. So at 80 degrees, that means it's about 1.039 as far as this hydrometer that's calibrated for 60. As you can see, it's going to be a really light colored wort. The beer itself is going to be even lighter. So basically, if it's at 1.039 right now, it's probably going to rise by about 8 to 10 points. So we should be looking at 1.049. So as high as I really want to go anyway, because with the yeast, I am not making a starter, which I know is probably pretty controversial. But we should be fine. I mean, as far as inoculating less than 5 gallons of beer at still relatively low gravity, it should be alright. So we're using, once again, yeast 2575 Kolsch 2. Couldn't find the 2565 at the beer store, but this is fine. It's supposedly just basically an upgraded version of the original strain. It should finish a little drier even than that one. So it's a smack pack, pretty simple. Just take it, you find the yeast nutrient package that's in here, wherever this is. There it is. And then you basically just smack it really hard and break the packet. You should be able to feel it. And shake it up for about a minute. And basically, yeah, the yeast should start absorbing the nutrients over the course of a couple hours, and this package is going to swell up really, really big. And basically, yeah, at this point we just leave it kind of in a warm area for a little while. By a little while, I mean like 2 or 3 hours over the course of the entire brew, and it should be fine and ready to pitch by the time we actually have it done. So I just figured I'd take a little time while this finishes up getting ready to boil. I'm just going to do a couple spiels on the beer and some other stuff. So first of all, one great thing about this sort of beer is that, number one, it's a 90-minute boil to drive off DMS that's present in Pilsner malt. But it's only got one hop addition in the beginning and one at the end, and so it's pretty hands-off. Don't have to really worry about doing anything after I put that first hop addition in for about an hour or so. And that's really nice, because then you can just kind of take care of some other stuff at the same time, take care of your sanitation, that sort of thing. Second thing is I expect this to really benefit a lot from the soft water profile that's here in Boston. So it's, I don't really care too much about the water chemistry in my beer, because I've made fantastic beer without fiddling with the water at all. And that's coming from a pretty basic soft water profile. Struggles sometimes with hoppy beers because it's not so much calcium carbonate to bring out the hops water hardness that brings out hop flavor, but it's minimal. I mean, it's really not that big of a factor. It is enough to take your beer from being really good to great. But I'm really the only one that drinks my beer, plus a couple other people, because you can't sell homebrew. So, I mean, it's really up to you whether you want to mess with your water or not, but just know that you don't have to. But anyway, I digress. The soft water here basically is actually very similar to the water profiles in Pilsen or in Cologne, the places where these light lagers and ales and crispy, clean ales were brewed. And a lot of the reason why they are so, I guess, delicate in their flavor is because of that water profile. So I think this is actually the first time I brewed one like that. So I think the water profile here in Boston should be interesting, and it should be neat to see what that does. Alright, well, it's time to add hops. So I have my 1 ounce of hallertau hops in here. We'll just drop that right in. And it's going to have a little bit of a break of its own. Alright, now we're just going to secure it. Basically just I tie it off right here in the edge and let it sit there. And then I'll just pull it out and add more hops as I see fit later on. Alright, now it's time to add some hops. Well, 4 hops. These are check saws, primarily for aroma. So, let's go ahead and do that. So, hopefully everything has successfully precipitated out and we get a nice light golden colored wort. Look at that. Oh, that's nice. Alright, so now just wait. So I'm going to put about 4 gallons into the fermenter here. That gives me plenty of room to work with as far as checking gravity and topping off my secondary fermenter. So hopefully that's exactly what we get out of this. That also should allow me to take 4 gallons of pure wort out of here instead of worrying too much about getting too much trub in there. Although that's really not a consequence. It's really not a bad thing. It doesn't have any sort of adverse effects on the final flavor of the beer, thanks to Brewlosophy, again, for proving that one. And also, since I'll be using a secondary fermenter, anything that gets left at the bottom, as far as sludge for this guy, won't make it into the secondary. So, we're going to be fine. Oh, wow. Oh, this is interesting. So, I might have... Okay, so I might have screwed up a little bit. And made it a little too strong. We are at 1.058, which, if it ferments out to all the way down to 1010 like it's supposed to, we could be looking at a 6% beer. 6.5%, I think. So, it's been in the fridge for about 3 or 4 hours now. Cooled it down to about 62 degrees. So at this point, we are going to aerate the wort and then pitch the yeast. Pretty simple. So instead of aerating by shaking, what I'm going to do is actually whip it up with this sanitized whisk and use that so you get a good inch or 2 of nice foam on top and get it going. And this is just ensuring there's enough dissolved oxygen in the wort to sufficiently feed the yeast. I don't like to splash it because it kind of gets it on parts of the fermenter that I may have missed in sanitation or whatever. I don't like to shake it too much. So it's just kind of this whisk method is really good for getting good starting. So that is a crap load of foam. So I think we are going to be all right. All right, so now we're going to pitch the yeast. But first of all, I need to explain some things. As you can see, this mag pack's swelled up pretty well. But I noticed that in this course, after I bought it, I noticed this package is actually about 4 months old. So as a result, it might not be much more than 50% viable. So given that information, and given the fact that I really don't want to have an underpitched wort, I've whipped up my emergency US-05, which is a clean, almost flavorless yeast, especially when it's fermented cold. And that should give us more than enough yeast to use during fermentation. So it's going to be a blend of the Kolsch yeast and the US-05. So all things considered, we should get a very good and interesting beer, and it definitely will ferment all the way out. So sanitize the outside of the smack pack first. Give it another quick shake, and then we're going to open it just a little bit because we don't want to get the plastic nutrient pack in there. And then you just pour it in. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing with the rehydrated US-05. Okay, now that that's done, man, didn't really get all of it, didn't I? Yeah, there's more than enough yeast in there. All right, now that that's all done, put the top back on, and fill up the airlock one more time. And I'm going to go put this in my bedroom where it is 60 degrees and will be 60 degrees for another week or so. And I will see you guys all when fermentation is done. Alright, so the Kolsch is now in the fridge. We hit final gravity really quickly after about 5 days of fermentation. Given how much yeast we put in, it was pretty fast fermentation. We had final gravity of 1.009, so it fermented out pretty well. Had some issues with temperature control because we hit a really weird heat wave in February, and it was 75 degrees outside, so it wasn't kept at the ideal 60 degrees. So we'll see how it tastes when it comes out. But anyway, this is going to lager in here for about a month. This is in secondary. As you can see, I basically removed all the possible headspace I could. That way we don't have too much oxygenation going on in the wort. So, alright, catch up with you guys in a month when this is done. Alright, so today we're going to be tasting my Kolsch. So it's been in the bottle just about a month now. Because I lagered it and cold stored it for so long, the yeast basically dropped out of suspension before I bottled it. So there wasn't that much yeast left in the bottle to actually consume the priming sugar and create carbonation. So it took a lot longer than usual in order to carbonate. But it's ready now, and today we'll be tasting it. So let's go. Alright, so as you can see here, it is crystal clear. I'm very proud of how clear this beer turned out. So let's have a taste. That is delicious. That's nice and light, really crisp. So it finished at, below 1010 as far as gravity. So it's super, super light, super tasty, very crispy. Got great carbonation going on here. But as you can see, there's no head retention, probably because, it's basically 6.5%, because we screwed some stuff up during the brew. But you can't even tell. I mean, honestly, this tastes just like a 4.5% Kolsch would. Nice and great malt character, great Pilsner character. Got some great smelling Saaz hops in there as far as the aroma goes. God, this is one of my best beers. I'm really proud of this. And it tastes amazing. So I'm going to be having quite a few of these over the next several weeks. So glad I could share it with you. Cheers.